Hello, welcome to a brand new video. Today we finish our three-part series on political philosophy with the 18th century French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In the previous video we discussed Thomas Hobbes and then John Locke, so I advise you to check out those two videos before watching this one for further context. But in short, Hobbes believed that people in the state of nature or a condition without government, everyone would be out for each other's throats, such that life would be nasty, brutish, and short, and to avoid this we must give up all our rights to the sovereign. Locke, on the other hand, argued while the state of nature isn't necessarily a state of war, it's unstable due to the lack of impartial authority to resolve disputes. So individuals should consent to form a government to protect their natural rights of life, liberty, and property. But unlike Hobbes, Locke believed that these rights could never be entirely surrendered. So now we come to Rousseau. So before society had established itself, man was a simple and empathetic creature who could find food and shelter easily. And society, however, brings the unnatural competition and deceit and aggression. And one will not fall into these traits when there's an abundance of goods, but once competition is introduced, an individual will attempt to gain advantage over the fellow human in order to survive as there is pressure over resources. So Rousseau argued that the progression of arts and sciences has corrupted human morality and nature. A purely intellectual culture is the antithesis of what humans ought to abide by. Civilized society requires uniformity amongst its citizens, and that basic interactions with others are a mask of our true selves to fit in society's standards. And this rigidity would lead to hypocrisy and inhibits human nature, so therefore society would become immoral. Someone may ask whether our advancements in technology and sciences has truly led to a more happy and content society, and that's probably the question that Ted Kaczynski asked himself. And furthermore, has our purpose become solely to work ourselves to death and a mindless job that we convince ourselves to be fulfilling? And this is probably what Marx asked as well. And Rousseau would argue that the simple life is better. And for example, we look at Einstein's equations or Newton's equations and how much they developed our understanding of the universe. But what does that have to do with our personal lives? The average villager with a simple life, only focusing on their family and growing their crops, has no need of these formulas about gravity. So then the question becomes, why did man develop society if it was so detrimental to his true nature? And the answer is because agriculture, technology, and property are too appealing to ignore. Yet there are the same features that led to class divisions and poverty, and Rousseau makes this clear abundantly with the first sentence of his book, The Social Contract, and extra points if you can name the painting as well. So Rousseau says in chapter 1 of his Social Contract that, quote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. He who believes himself the master of others fails to not be a greater slave than they. How did this change come about? I do not know. What can make it legitimate? I do believe I can resolve that issue." So under what conditions is being in change legitimate? In other words, what makes social contract theory legitimate? And a social contract theory, as I mentioned in previous videos, tries to prove the legitimacy of government by explaining why people should give up some of their freedoms. Rousseau believes that this kenosis of freedom should not be unconditional. He says, quote, "To renounce liberty is to renounce being a man, to surrender the rights and duties of humanity. Freedom of choice or liberty is a necessity for our morals and established by our nature. Therefore, he is against a rule by the strongest, which is a critique against Thomas Hobbes, or whoever has the most power will take over. However, he is also against governing by the majority rule, which is a critique of John Locke, as he states, quote, 'How have 100 men who wish for a master the right to vote on the behalf of 10 who do not? The law of majority voting is itself something established by convention and presupposes unanimity, on one occasion at least.'" What this quote is saying is that if 100 people want to pick a leader, but 10 don't agree with that decision, it doesn't seem right for the 100 people to make the choice for everyone, as those 10 people's voice are equally valuable, and to deny their voice is to deny their humanity. So how do we formulate the best type of government? Rousseau says, quote, "The problem is to find a form of association which will defend and protect with the whole common force the person and goods of each associate, and which with each, while uniting himself with all, may still obey himself alone and remain as free as before." One has to be both united with others while not giving up their individual liberty, which is quite the difficult proposition. Rousseau believes that the answer is when the sovereign is what he calls the general will. So the general will isn't majority rule, however it is not 100% consensus either, nor is it the sum of everyone's wills or compromise. One is not bound by the laws they disagree with. The general will arises out of a dialectical method. Everyone must come together to debate, and only then the general will be discovered and the self-interest will be abolished voluntarily, such that one's self-interest would become the interest of the community. And when the general will is established, it becomes morally binding upon each individual as is the best interest of the community. So Rousseau further states that, quote, "It follows from what has gone before that the general will is always right and tends to the public advantage, but it does not follow that the deliberations of the people are always equally correct." So what this quote means is that the general will is always correct as it is from the people, even if the people are incorrect in their conclusion. Rousseau does indeed argue that the general will, as an expression of the collective will of the people aiming at the common good, is inherently right or virtuous. However, Rousseau also acknowledges that the deliberations and decisions made by the people may be incorrect, but as long as the general will arises, it will be correct. So furthermore, to establish the general will, there must be a legislator or lawgiver. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, quote, "However, Rousseau also clearly believes that the mere contemplation of self-interest would be inadequate to generate a general will. This may partly concern issues of compliance, since selfish citizens who can wield the general will might still not be moved to obey it. But Rousseau also seems to believe that citizen virtue is a necessary condition for the emergence of the general will in the first place. This presents him with a problem for which his figure of the legislator is one proposed solution. The legislator therefore has the function of inspiring a sense of collective identity in the new citizens that allows them to identify the whole and be moved to support legislation that will eventually transform them and their children into good citizens. The lawgiver helps and leads the people in formulating the general will. The general will set the norms and legislation of society. The government is the expression of the general will to execute these laws into actuality. So Rousseau believes that the democracy in the purest form is the best type of government. And thank you for watching this video on Rousseau. Hopefully that made sense to you, and if not, please leave the questions in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe as always.